Do you need to get money out of your retirement accounts? Well, for some, a coronavirus related distribution may be the answer, but for others, there may be another solution. And here to talk about that with me is Robert Klein from the Retirement Income Center. Robert, you recently wrote an article for us on Retirement Daily about this subject. Eager to have you walk us through it. And perhaps you could first start by talking a bit about what the coronavirus related distributions are.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Basically, the coronavirus related distributions is a provision of the CARES Act that came out in March, whereby it allows plan participants, to the extent that their plan provides for it, to take a distribution from their plan up to $100,000. And there's 3 tax breaks associated with coronavirus related distributions, or CRDs. First of all, the 10% penalty that would normally be assessed if you take distributions, if you're 59 and a half or under, that would be waived. Number 2, tax on the distribution is due. However, it can be spread over 3 years. And then number 3, if you can repay the funds, you have the opportunity to do so over 3 years. And to the extent you've paid taxes on the distributions, you can amend your returns to apply for a refund.
So if someone doesn't qualify for CRD, what sort of options do they have to get money out of their retirement accounts?
Well, that's a good question. Let's talk about first how you can qualify for CRD. There's 3 different ways. One is that you're diagnosed with COVID-19. Number 2 is your spouse or dependent could be diagnosed with COVID-19. And number 3, you experience what's called a adverse financial consequence as a result of being quarantined, being furloughed or laid off, or having your work hours reduced. And it's pretty broad as to who qualifies. But like you're saying, there are situations where you may not meet the qualifications, and or your plan may not have a provision for CRDs. So there is another opportunity, unlike the CRD opportunity, which is generally limited to 2020 for distributions, and generally most people do it one time if it's allowed. Section C72T is a provision in the Internal Revenue Code that's been around since 1989 that has allowed individuals who are either separated from service and have a retirement plan, or have an IRA account, start their own distribution plan. It requires a commitment to what are called substantially equal payments over a period of years. And there's 4 requirements for a 72T plan. First and foremost, it must continue for the greater of 5 years or until you're 59 and a half. That's number 1. Number 2, the distributions must be made annually using either a calendar or a fiscal year. Number 3, the distributions must be substantially equal with no change in the payment formula and no stoppage of payments unless there's a disability or you die. And then the 4th requirement is it has to use either a single or joint life distribution method.
Right. So before we talk about the various ways that you have to annuitize it, the various methods, can you just chat a little bit about what kind of fact pattern exists for someone who might have a 72T? Obviously, this is a big commitment to take money over the course of 5 years when maybe all you might need is a short-term buffer.
Yeah, that's really key as to who would want to use a 72T. I think, first of all, you got to look at your age, because if, let's say, for instance, you're 45 years old, you're committing to a plan that's going to be 14 years in length because it's greater than 5 years or until you're 59 and a half. Number 2, it's somebody who really, in the case of somebody who has a retirement plan who wants to set up the 72T, it's somebody who lost their job. And I would say the prospects aren't looking good for a new job. You got to keep in mind that this is a commitment, and then if you get a new job 6 months from now, you still have to keep your 72T going. And then number three, perhaps most important, you have to think about the fact that with the 72T plan, you're really going against the grain as far as your why you have a retirement plan to begin with. It's generally intended to be a long-term plan that you're going to make contributions to for a certain period of time. And to the extent that you start a 72T plan, or for that matter, a coronavirus-related distribution, you're disrupting your initial goal with both types of plans.
Serious business to take a 72T. Obviously, you're here to make the complicated uncomplicated, but there are complications with the 72T, including the various ways that you have to annuitize them. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, first of all, there's required distributions must be made using an acceptable annuitization method. There's three that are basically blessed by the IRS. I won't go into too much detail on them, but basically the first one is a minimum distribution method similar to the required minimum distribution calculations. Second is an amortization method, and third is an annuity factor method. So those are one type of thing that you have to stick to, is one of those annuitization methods. And so that is the most important consideration when you're setting up a 72T, is your ability to stick to it. Because if you don't stick to it, the consequences can be very expensive. You're not only going to get hit with the 10% distribution, premature distribution penalty. That penalty will be applied retroactively to all distributions that you've taken. So for instance, if you started this plan when you were 45 years old and you're going along and you've been taking distributions for 10 years, and one year you decide, I want to take a little more than my annuitized amount. I need some improvements done to my house. I'm going to take 20,000 more this year. Well, you just blew the plan, and furthermore, you blew it for all the years retroactively, and you have to pay a 10% penalty on that. So the consequences are pretty severe if you don't stick to your plan.
Let me go back to the annuitization methods for a second. Obviously, this is not something a do-it-yourselfer should be doing, right? This is, in order to choose the appropriate method, you should be talking to a qualified, competent CPA, competent professional.
Absolutely, yeah. And that gets into the planning for this. First and foremost, you need to decide, is this the right approach for you? Does this make sense? So as part of that approach, a CPA will look at the different methods. We'll look at, furthermore, how much should you be committing to this plan, because generally you want to carve out dollars from an existing IRA account that you have to use for this 72T plan, and only commit the amount that you foresee you're going to need for the length of the plan. And that can get fairly complicated if you try to do it yourself.
Any other planning considerations in the short or long term?
Just some of the considerations are the types of things that can get you into trouble, types of what are called plan modifications. And so I gave one example where you can take an excess distribution that can get you into trouble. If you miss a distribution, that's another plan modification. Reduced distributions, also changes in the account balance that you're using for your calculations. Another thing that can inadvertently get you into trouble is adding funds to your 72T account. You cannot add to that account once you segregate that and set that up. So there's a lot of little things that can trip you up with a 72T plan. And once again, it's a commitment for a long time, and it's easy to fall into one of these traps if you're not careful.
Yeah. So one last question for me, which is, Uh, is it limited to various types of IRAs? Can you use a SEP IRA, an inherited IRA, or a simple IRA, or is it just a traditional IRA that you can use this with?
Traditional IRAs work, SEP IRAs work because those are treated for tax purposes similar to traditional IRAs.
Well, anything that we haven't touched upon that we should before we wrap up, Robert?
Just in terms of, once again, the most important point is both these types of solutions, the coronavirus related distributions and the 72T, help you in a pinch, with needed funds, especially, there's a lot of people affected with the coronavirus. So it can be potentially a good short-term solution. However, you really need to think twice about implementing either one of them. It's got to really make sense. And first of all, you need to look at other potential opportunities, solutions that are out there for getting money.
Right. And I guess I always say one last question, but I always have another question. And so I'm always lying about that. But so that might include, for instance, a reverse mortgage or a home equity line or the cash value in your life insurance, among other things.
Yeah, you definitely, it's really a great time to examine your whole situation and not have like a knee-jerk reaction and say, oh, there's this CRD opportunity. I could just grab funds from my retirement plan. It's really a perfect opportunity to look at your entire financial situation and do some, soul searching, see what is the best method, best combination of methods to go.
Great. Well, I want to thank you for chatting and sharing your knowledge about this topic with us. It's much appreciated.
Thank you, Bob.
Pleasure.